The shimmering glow of the Cirrus-12 orbital habitat belied a society that valued perfection above all. On the outside, the station glittered against the darkness of space like a jewel. Inside, the Stramathi population maintained a strict, almost obsessive adherence to uniformity. Delicate beings with diaphanous skin that caught the light like polished opal, the Stramathi moved with a precision and grace that bordered on choreography. Everything in their culture was curated, from the harmonious tones of their speech to the intricate patterns in their holographic art. It was a world engineered for balance and symmetry. Anything that deviated from that harmony was swiftly deemed a flaw. Jala had been a deviation from the moment she was born. Taller, broader, and stronger than her kin, she had been whispered about from her first steps. She didn't glide down corridors like the others. She strode. Her voice, instead of a soft melody, carried a powerful resonance that made conversation halt whenever she spoke. As she grew, the gap between her and the others widened, not just in stature but in how she was treated. She didn't fit into their tight, communal spaces. She couldn't wear the elegant, flowing garments designed for the slender Stramathi frames. Even the customary dances, a central part of their social fabric, became awkward exercises where she towered over her partners and disrupted the seamless flow. Her size wasn't just a physical anomaly. In a society where coupling and reproduction were carefully planned to maintain their unique genome, her genetic profile was considered unwelcome. She was seen as a risk, a potential contaminant to their refined lineage. When she reached the age where most Stramathi chose their lifelong mates, no one came forward for her. She was told, gently at first, and then with increasing bluntness, that no one would. The Council of Elders, a body of silver-skinned, statuesque figures who ruled the station, finally decreed that Jala's presence in the core community was unsustainable. The official term used was displacement, but everyone understood what it meant. Jala was to leave the biosphere core and live on the outskirts, alone. The outskirts of Cirrus-12 were nothing like the verdant, controlled environment of the core. There were no lush green terraces, no cascading lightfalls, no perfectly tuned air currents. Instead, Jala found herself in a landscape of humming machinery and bare metal corridors. Cooling vents hissed, conduits throbbed with energy, and the distant rumble of industrial generators was a constant companion. This was where the station's automated systems handled waste recycling, energy distribution, and external repairs. No Stramathi lived here, only drones and Jala. She made her home in an abandoned maintenance alcove. The room was small, but at least she didn't have to crouch as she did in the central habitats. A stack of discarded container lids became her bed. Old thermal blankets, scavenged from an unmanned depot, served as her coverings. The dim, cold light of flickering maintenance panels illuminated her days, while the station's artificial night cycle passed in an eerie quiet, punctuated only by the occasional clank of a drone realigning a panel or sealing a crack in the station's hull. At first, the solitude was crushing. Her kind were social beings, their lives interwoven in an intricate web of relationships and shared experiences. Here, Jala had no one. The only voices she heard were the monotone alerts of automated systems. She tried to fill the silence with songs, melodies she remembered from her youth. But the sound of her own voice was both comforting and heartbreaking. Each note reminded her of the people who had once sung beside her, the friends who no longer visited, and the family that rarely spoke her name. Survival became her focus. She learned which drone supply caches were never monitored, how to tap into the station's water conduits, and where to find the heat exhaust vents that provided some measure of warmth. In time, she carved out a routine. She began crafting small, intricate sculptures from scrap material, using her large hands with surprising delicacy. She lined the alcove walls with her creations, shapes that caught the light and spun it in playful patterns. It wasn't much, but it gave her days a sense of purpose. Despite her efforts to build a life, Jala couldn't escape the longing for something more. Each day she stood at the narrow viewport near her alcove and stared out at the endless black sea of stars. Somewhere out there, she thought, might be a place where her size wasn't a burden, where she wasn't shunned, and where she could finally feel whole. Until then, she remained in the shadows of Cirrus 12, an exile in a world that had no place for her. The Terran shuttle arrived on Cirrus 12 with little fanfare. To the Stramathi, humans were a curiosity at best, an inconvenience at worst. Bulky plane creatures who spoke too loudly, moved too clumsily, and carried themselves with a casual disregard for the grace the Stramathi prized. Diplomacy required tolerating them, and so the delegation was ushered into the glittering core biosphere for their talks, assigned a pristine conference pavilion that sparkled with the subtle iridescence of Stramathi aesthetics. For most of the human delegation, it was an honor to walk in the fabled halls of Cirrus 12. For Aaron Ward, it was another mission, another habitat to visit, another alien species to study. Aaron was a xenobiologist, a good one, if not a well-known one. While others in his field sought to chronicle the grand diversity of galactic life or classify the complex biochemistry of far-flung species, Aaron's interest had always been the outliers, the individuals who didn't fit into their own societies. He had a soft spot for the ones who were different, who didn't meet their culture's lofty standards. It was no surprise, then, that the moment he heard the Stramathi mention a banished giant who lived in the station's outer ring, he couldn't resist slipping away from the formalities to find her. Aaron was good at going unnoticed. While the rest of the Terran delegation filed through polished hallways under the watchful gaze of Stramathi custodians, Aaron ventured into the dim corridors that no one spoke of. These were places where the glittering surfaces gave way to dull, unpolished metal, where the air was colder, tinged with the faint tang of ionized gases and machine oil. He passed repair drones clattering through access shafts and low hums of machinery buried behind reinforced bulkheads. His boots echoed on the deck plates, the only sound beyond the mechanical whispers of a habitat that never truly slept. It wasn't long before he found her. The figure in front of him was hard to miss. Jala was even larger than he had imagined, her massive form a sharp contrast against the tight, efficient spaces of the maintenance decks. She was seated on a crate, her long legs stretched out, hands busily sculpting something small and intricate from a piece of salvaged alloy. For a moment, she didn't notice him. Aaron watched as she worked, her large hands moving with a delicacy that seemed incongruous with her size. When she finally glanced up, her first reaction was alarm. She rose swiftly, towering over him, her expression wary. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice resonant, almost musical in its depth. Aaron raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Aaron Ward," he said. "I'm human. From the Terran delegation." He hesitated, then added, "I heard about you." Jala's eyes narrowed. "Did you come to gawk?" "No," Aaron said quickly. "I came because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because I know what it's like to be the odd one out." She tilted her head slightly, as though trying to decide whether to believe him. Her skin shimmered faintly in the low light, her presence filling the narrow corridor. Finally, she gestured toward a smaller crate near her own seat. "You might as well sit," she said. Aaron obeyed, lowering himself onto the crate. He noticed the sculptures around them, intricate, luminous shapes that refracted the dull maintenance light into faint rainbows. "You made these?" he asked. Jala nodded, folding her arms across her chest. "They're nothing," she said gruffly. "Just something to pass the time." "They're beautiful," Aaron said. "Delicate, I wouldn't have guessed." He stopped himself, realizing how it might sound. Jala's lips quirked slightly, a hint of a bitter smile. "You wouldn't have guessed someone my size could make something so small?" Aaron hesitated, then smiled. "No, I wouldn't have guessed that someone out here in a maintenance corridor would make art at all. The Stramathi I've met in the core, they talk a lot about beauty, but it's also imperfect, so uniform. This," he gestured to the sculptures, "this is unique. It feels alive." For a moment, Jala said nothing. Then, to Aaron's surprise, she laughed, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls. It wasn't the bitter chuckle of someone accustomed to scorn, It was real, unguarded. "You're strange, human," she said. "I think I like that." It was the beginning of something unexpected. Aaron found himself returning to the maintenance decks day after day. He brought supplies from the human ship, food packets, tools, books filled with human art and poetry. He asked Jala questions, not just about her life in exile, but about her people, her culture, her view of the stars outside. She in turn taught him how to see beauty in the mundane, how to look at a piece of scrap metal and imagine it as a soaring sculpture, how to hear music in the rhythm of machinery. Slowly, Jala's walls began to come down. She still regarded Aaron with a mixture of curiosity and caution, but she no longer flinched at his presence. They spent hours talking, laughing, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. In Aaron, Jala found someone who didn't see her size as a curse, someone who didn't care about the narrow definitions of beauty that had defined her life. For Aaron, Jala was a reminder of why he had chosen to study the galaxy's outcasts. She was more than just an anomaly. She was a person with a depth of experience and perspective that no genetic blueprint could define. Together, they began to build a fragile connection, a bond that, despite the odds, made the cold impersonal. Corridors of Cirrus 12 feel a little warmer. In the weeks that followed, Aaron and Jala's connection deepened. Each day Aaron spent on the outer fringes of Cirrus 12 became a testament to the unexpected friendship forming between the human biologist and the outcast Stramathi. The maintenance corridors, once cold and barren, began to feel almost welcoming, at least to the two of them. They shared meals of packaged rations, exchanged stories of their vastly different homeworlds, and found humor in the peculiarities of each other's cultures. Where Aaron's laughter was loud and unrestrained, Jala's was a rumbling chuckle that seemed to echo through the metallic passages. As their conversations unfolded, Aaron learned more about Jala's life before her exile. She spoke hesitantly at first, her words slow and cautious, but as trust built, her stories came more freely. She described her childhood in the lush biosphere, how she had loved the crystalline streams and towering arboretums. She had been proud of her strength as a young Stramathi, until she began to realize that it set her apart. By the time she reached adulthood, the pride had turned to shame, though never entirely her own. It was the judgment of her peers, the whispers, the constant reminder that she was too big, and therefore unworthy. Aaron listened carefully, never interrupting, and when she finished, he only said, "It wasn't right what they did. I hope you know that." Jala didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out of the viewport, her eyes focused on the endless stars. "Knowing something's wrong doesn't make it hurt any less," she finally said. Aaron nodded in understanding. He had seen similar pain in others, alien refugees denied a home, human outliers shunned by their communities. But what struck him most was Jala's resilience. She hadn't crumbled under the weight of exile. She had found ways to survive, to create, to keep a spark of life going in a place designed to erase individuality. In return, Jala became increasingly curious about Aaron's world. At first, she had dismissed humans as a clumsy, overconfident species. But Aaron's gentle demeanor and genuine interest in her changed her perspective. She began to ask him about Earth, what it was like to walk under a natural sky, to feel rain, to hear the chaos of a crowded city. Aaron described it all with a wistful smile, drawing pictures on scraps of metal with a stylus he'd brought from his ship. "Earth's not perfect," he admitted, "but it's big enough that everyone can find a corner to call their own." Jala's hands paused over one of her sculptures. "I don't think the Stramathi believe in corners," she said. "Everything must fit a perfect shape." Aaron tilted his head, looking at her. "Maybe that's their loss," he said. "If everything fits too perfectly, there's no room to grow." It was this sort of insight that left Jala wondering if perhaps there was more to the universe than the rigid structure she had known. She started to think differently about herself, not as a mistake or an anomaly, but as someone who could be part of a larger, messier, more interesting picture. Aaron's presence wasn't just comforting, it was liberating. As the days went on, their routine became something of a ritual. Aaron would arrive after his official duties were finished, carrying a satchel of supplies and a smile. They would share their findings of the day, Aaron's field notes on Stramathi biology, Jala's newest sculpture or improvised tool. They played a game of invention, challenging each other to create something new from the scraps they could find. Jala discovered that Aaron's imagination, while unrefined by Stramathi standards, was boundless and infectious. Aaron, in turn, marveled at Jala's ability to bring elegance to even the most utilitarian objects. Their laughter filled the maintenance corridors, their shared moments transforming the space. What had once been a stark mechanical limbo was now filled with light and warmth, even if only in spirit. Jala was no longer just an exile, she was an artist, a creator, and, most importantly, a friend. And Aaron, who had come to Cirrus 12 expecting nothing more than another routine mission, had found something infinitely more valuable, someone who reminded him that even in the coldest corners of space, connection and understanding could thrive. For the first time in a long time, both of them felt something they hadn't dared to hope for: belonging. Aaron was seated cross-legged on the floor of Jala's alcove, one of her delicate sculptures in his hand. He turned it over carefully, letting the low, flickering light catch on its intricate edges. The piece was unmistakably her work. Strong, yet refined, a paradox of elegance and solidity that seemed to embody Jala herself. "How did you do this?" Aaron asked, genuinely amazed. "This alloy's tough. It's hard to imagine shaping it so precisely." Jala, who was perched on an overturned crate, shrugged lightly. "You work with what you have. It's not that different from your stories of humans carving stone or bending steel. It just takes time." She paused. "And persistence." Aaron set the sculpture down and looked at her. "You're good at that." "Good at what?" "Persistence. I've never met anyone more determined than you," he said, his voice steady. "Most people would have given up after being pushed aside, ignored. You didn't. You made a life. You made art." Jala shifted in her seat, her massive hands clasped together. "What choice did I have? It's not like I could go back to the core." "No," Aaron said. "But you could have stopped trying." "You didn't." Their conversation was interrupted by the faint hum of a distant comm signal. Aaron checked his wrist terminal, reading the notification with a faint grimace. The Terran delegation's mission was ending. Tomorrow, the human diplomats would board their shuttle and return to Earth. Officially, the negotiations had gone well. Agreements were signed, resources allocated. Yet, as far as Aaron was concerned, the real work had been done here, in the forgotten corridors of Cirrus 12. And now his time with Jala was running out. Jala noticed his expression. "What is it?" Aaron hesitated. "The mission's almost over. We leave tomorrow." The words lingered in the air. Jala said nothing, her gaze falling to the floor. After a long pause, she finally murmured, "You're leaving." "I don't want to," Aaron said, his voice firm. "But I'm not sure I have a choice. Earth isn't the kind of place where you just disappear off a mission without someone asking questions. If I stay here, it won't be as simple as picking up where we left off." "I understand," Jala replied quietly. "You have a home to go back to, a place where you belong." "That's not what I mean," Aaron said, his tone almost urgent. "You belong somewhere too. I've been watching you for weeks. You're not just surviving out here, you're thriving. You have something to offer, even if the Stramathi can't see it yet." Jala gave a bitter laugh. "You don't know the council. They won't listen to me, not after all this time." "Then let me help," Aaron said. "I have connections, leverage. My people respect me because I'm good at what I do. If I speak up for you, they'll have to listen." Her dark eyes met his, searching for any hint of insincerity. "You'd risk that? For me?" "For you, yes," Aaron said, his voice unwavering. "I'll talk to the council. I'll show them what I've seen. The art, the resourcefulness, the strength. They'll understand that you're not a liability. You're an asset. I'll make them see that." Jala was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded, though her expression remained guarded. If you think it'll make a difference, go ahead. But don't make promises you can't keep, human. I've had enough of those. Aaron's conversation with the council was tense. He stood in the grand hall of the Corps, facing the shimmering silver-skinned elders who had long ago decided Jala's fate. They listened as he recounted her resourcefulness, her creativity, and the friendship that had grown between them. At first, their faces were impassive, their questions curt, but as Aaron spoke, something shifted. He showed them the sculptures he'd collected, described the tools she'd fashioned from scraps, explained the ways her size and strength could be a benefit rather than a hindrance. He asked them to reconsider, not out of charity, but out of logic. You say you value beauty and function, he argued. Jala embodies both. It was a slow, reluctant process, but eventually, the elders agreed to reevaluate Jala's role. They couldn't ignore the weight of a Terran diplomat's words, nor the evidence Aaron presented. In the end, they offered Jala a position on a new exploratory team, an assignment that would take her far from the core and into the unknown reaches of space, where her strength and ingenuity would be vital. When Aaron returned to the outskirts to deliver the news, he found Jala standing by the viewport. Her gaze was fixed on the stars, her face unreadable. They agreed, Aaron said simply. They want you on the exploratory team. Jala turned to him, her expression still guarded. And what about you? Will you be here when I get back? Aaron hesitated, the words catching in his throat. I'll try, he said. But even if I can't stay, I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. You don't have to hide out here. You can be part of something bigger. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll go. For the first time, Aaron saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It was enough. He reached out, placing a hand on her arm, and she didn't pull away. Together, they turned back to the viewport, looking out at the infinite possibilities that awaited them both.